Yeah.
So welcome everyone to another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. I'm Nick Wagner Sr. It is Sunday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, so we're doing another fantastic interview tonight with Taralyn Romero Ball. So Taralyn, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So every night, every Sunday night we do this, and we record it live here on LinkedIn. We also stream it to YouTube, and then what we do is we'll go ahead and share this on YouTube for everyone to be able to watch it later. And then we also turn it into a podcast. So I will actually take the video, take the audio from it. We'll release it on all major podcast platforms, so Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. And we always make sure to get your contact information shared with anyone that's going to be watching, so we can make sure to include like your LinkedIn or whatever you want with the show description. So why don't we, I always like to start with this question. If you met someone at a conference or at work for the first time, and you were going to give like a 2-minute elevator speech on who you are, what would you say?
Oh gosh. Well, I don't think I'd use 2 minutes to say who I am. I don't know if anyone has the capacity for that. It's funny how 60 seconds can feel long when you're talking about yourself, especially if it's 120.
Well, you're about to talk about yourself for 45 minutes, so get ready.
I know. Hopefully, it'll be interesting and engaging. We'll see if we can make it work. I don't know if I'm going to beat the first couple of seconds of this, though. That was pretty funny for anyone that came in early. All right. So about me in a nutshell, I guess the less than 2-minute soundbite. I'm a Colorado girl. I've always been a hard worker and a scrapper. No matter what, I'm kind of up for seizing opportunities. My career journey has really kind of been a bumpy ride with a lot of bold moves kind of throughout the years. Very unconventional. I'm a big risk taker when it comes to approaching challenges and taking things head on. So I've kind of done that throughout my entire career. I went to community college, worked 2 jobs while putting myself through school. And then in my career have found that I've often taken a lot of roles where I really didn't know what I was doing, but kind of found that to be part of the fun and part of the reason why I can stay energized after almost 20 years in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that journey, because I think it's a unique journey, and I think you're going to inspire a lot of people to kind of show where you started and where you are today, because you've had a lot of different roles with expanding responsibility and experiences that I think people are going to find really interesting. So, so you're, according to LinkedIn, you are VP of Innovation at Cigna, where we work together, a global health services company. And I like to ask people this, because when we're all little kids, like we always have these dreams of what we want to be when we grow up, right? So for me, it was an architect. I wanted to be an architect because I loved Legos and I was always building things. If you asked me when I was like, I don't know, probably ages like all the way until probably like 12 or 13, I would tell you I wanted to be an architect. So when you go back to, elementary school or middle school or high school, what was that one thing you wanted to be when you grew up? Because I'm going to guess it was not what you're doing today. I'm just going to guess, right? So what was it you wanted to be when you grew up, when you were a little kid?
I never thought about it in terms of what I wanted to be. It was always what I wanted to do. And you're right, it didn't involve healthcare in any way, shape, or form. I think I'd be surprised as a little girl to know what I'm doing now. But I always wanted to change the world. I wanted to have a big impact and do something that mattered and leave an impression. I had pets as a little kid, so you learn kind of quickly how they come and go. I said, one day I'm going to be gone. And I wanted to know that my life had some meaning in it. So it's always been a pretty simple purpose in terms of how I, imagine my life in the future. And I've tried to orientate myself around things that give me a chance to leave an impact.
So I love that answer. And I feel you were a lot more mature than I was at that age, because I don't think I really cared about impact. I think I just cared about, like, could I build cool things? So did you learn that? Did you learn that philosophy and that mindset from your parents? Like, how did you figure that out? Like, who taught you that? So I think that's a really interesting answer.
Yeah, thanks. I was really, really lucky to have super supportive parents. My dad was and continues to be my number one fan. So as a little girl, he's like, he was always singing my praises, always telling me I could do whatever I wanted to do. Girls did it better than boys. Really, anything to kind of just build me up and make me feel like I could tackle the world. And that really just stayed with me. He actually is still my number one cheerleader. So I'm very fortunate for
No, that's it. I've talked about this with numerous guests. It's just the impact that sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's a mentor that has on your life, right? And your decisions on what you want to be when you grow up. And to your point, being your father, the fact that he's still like, I can just picture the conversations of you calling him up and like, hey, Dad, I got a new job and here's what I'm doing, and him being all excited, right? So I love that.
Yeah, I actually have to be careful what I share with him, because if he will like mass share whatever news I share. So I have to kind of keep it to a minimum.
You have to disclose certain things, like, hey, you can only share this. No, that's funny. At least he's excited, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you wanted to change the world, which I think can be a challenge when you're getting your first job, say back in high school. So what was because I don't think many of us were changing the world at our first jobs in high school. What was the first job you ever got paid for way back when you were like a kid growing up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did like little, neighborhood, stands and stuff like that. So I won't count that. My first actual paid job where I had a W-2, I was stocking shelves for Michael's, which is like a hobby and craft store.
Yep.
And it was just easy money, and I could work hours that were complementary to my high school schedule. As I think like a lot of high school kids, I wanted a car, and I wanted a really cool car. But my parents told me I would have to pay for it along with my insurance. And so I needed a job that paid decent, and I could work on the nights and weekends, and that really served quite well. We also had a family friend that got me an in. So right away, I was helped by the network.
Yeah, so say you learn the power of networking at a very young age. And yeah, we needed gas money, right? Because you and I are on the same page. We needed 99-cent gallon gas, right? I remember that in high school. It was great. It was a great deal then. So you mentioned earlier community college. Was the expectation as you growing up that you were going to go to college, and that was just like not negotiable, or was that up to you, right? And I always hear different answers here, right? Because sometimes my guests will tell me their parents didn't really care what they did, right? Some of my guests went to the military, right? Some were entrepreneurs. What was that conversation? Because I'm going to guess your father was a big part of that decision, right? In that conversation. But what was that like growing up in high school?
Yeah, in high school, I was a really dedicated student, especially on the back half when I started figuring out that I better get my act together because it's going to matter. So, I was one of those kids that had like a fully loaded curriculum as a senior. I had all the AP classes and I did very well. I think because of that, my parents kind of left me to my own devices when it came to college. I think I applied for college a couple days before the cutoff ended, so I barely made it in. I ended up going to CU Boulder and found that it was a bit too soon for me. I really wasn't ready to go to college. I think maybe some of the discipline in high school kind of just burned me out. I said, I'm going to take a year off. And at that point, quite frankly, I wasn't sure if I'd go back because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it just, it felt like too much too soon kind of coming out of high school. So by the time I eventually did go back to college, it was after I had already entered into the workforce. And at that point, community college was kind of more within my realm. I had to pay for it myself. And similar to my first job, I took it because it could complement the responsibilities that I already had with my job at the time. So I'd go to college in the evenings and on the weekends. And in fact, I picked up a second job just to be able to pay for everything. So I was a very busy girl for a little while.
Yeah. And, I think I love how you mentioned community college, because I think with the, and everyone talks about it, right? With the cost of college these days, it being so expensive, I think community college is a great way for a lot of kids who don't know what they want to do to start the college education and start the process at a fraction of the price compared to a traditional four-year school. So I love how you mentioned that, because I think more and more kids and families are going to be looking into that just because the cost savings, right? So so good shout out to the community college. And I also think, to your point, you didn't really know what you wanted to do. I think that's just so common. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, right? And I'm 38, so I think it's almost impossible to expect, say, an 18-year-old kid to know what you want to do when you grow up.
Sure.
So let's talk about from a career perspective. So you mentioned you were already working when you went back to community college. So is that when you started at Great West? Were you working at Great West when you went to community college, or was there a different role before you started your career in healthcare?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was actually a different role before I started in what I would call kind of my career. In fact, before I even decided I want to go back to community college, what I really wanted to do was go travel the world. I wanted to go over to Europe. So there was this, I think they still have them now, but they certainly had them a lot more back then. It was like a temp to hire agency. They had one in the basement of a building called Great West Healthcare, which is where I kind of started off my corporate journey. And that was, it was a funny time because I was just looking to make a lot of money, squirrel it away, and then like head off to Europe. So they had these typing jobs, and they were offering $11 an hour to come in and basically do claims data entry. And before I even took the typing test, I had my first salary negotiation. I remember walking in the door and they said, kind of, here's the requirements of the job. Like, is all of this okay with you? And I said, yeah, except I don't want 11, but I'll do it for $13.50. And I remember the lady looking at me going, why in the world are we going to pay you $13.50? I said, well, because I can do twice the volume. I had, as a little kid, like computer access. And my father had like those typing tests and games.
Oh, that is funny.
I would do that for hours. So like my typing speed was ridiculous. My accuracy, I could do it without looking and without making a mistake. So I got the $13.50 really without any question after the results came back. And that was my very first job.
And wow, so you were negotiating salary in like your 20s, which is not common. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
So did you end up going to Europe and traveling the world for a little bit?
I never did. I ended up meeting a lot of friends around that time, and just had 101 reasons to kind of stay where I was at. The company also brought me on board as a permanent employee, I think within like 2 weeks, of seeing how fast I could type. And I did that job for probably about 3 years, really just, saving money, still thinking that maybe at some point I would go ahead and go to Europe. And then it really just dawned on me that, I wasn't going to go travel and I needed to get serious about what I was doing. And it was really at that juncture that I started thinking about everything very differently. Instead of, how can I get money to finance a trip?
Right.
It's more about how can I take a job or a role that's going to set me up well into the future. And I was lucky enough to see an administrative assistant posting on the job boards kind of as I was starting to feel like I needed to get more serious. And I said, I think that's the type of job that can easily springboard into something bigger. If you think about it as an administrative assistant, many of those roles are for leaders within the company who are doing big things. I said, if I can do a good job there, maybe it'll lead to something else. And so with a lot of deliberation, I took an administrative assistant job working for the VP of Provider Relations and Network Contracting. In fact, I showed up for the job interview in a little Red Riding Hood outfit through some serendipitous circumstances. So it was pretty interesting.
So that was Great West. So that was for people that don't know. So Great West was purchased by Cigna. I want to say in what year was it? 2004, 5? Maybe I have that wrong.
I think it was much later. So for me,
it was later.
Yeah, we started feeling it in 2008.
Okay.
Around the holidays, and then I think 2009 is when it became official.
2009. So that was really the beginning of your journey into the healthcare world. So it's interesting because I think the way you approached applying for that job was you had a lot of insight about, hey, this is what I want to do long term, and I think there's a lot of opportunity by taking this and by who I'm going to be able to network with and connect with, which I think is great. Once you got the job, right? So this was like really your first corporate job then, I guess, at this point, because the other job was more of you you weren't planning on being there, right? Like now you were like, okay, this is a career.
Yeah.
What was, I guess my question for you is what made you change? Like, what was the mindset change? How did that happen where you thought all of a sudden you had to get serious about your career? Was there like a life event that made that happen? Or do you think it was just more just kind of growing up?
I got so bored. Honestly, that's what it was. I'm like, I was showing up and typing for 8 hours a day and then clocking out and going home and getting on with my life. And that was really wonderful for about 3 years. And then I just got bored. I said, I want to do something more challenging. And if I'm going to do something more challenging and take the time to learn and be good at it, then I might as well make sure that it's a stepping stone to other things and
Yeah.
grow up a
No,
little.
that's that was not the answer I was expecting, but it's interesting. And it's funny how something as simple as like you were bored,
Yeah.
kind of made you get serious about your career, right? So that no, I find that interesting. So how long did you do the administrative assistant job for? And was your inclination correct that taking this job would lead to bigger things? Like how did that work?
Yeah. I appreciate the question. It's something I'm proud to share and proud to tell because I think it's about being bold and being brave in your pursuits. So I was in total in the administrative assistant job for about 2 years. Regardless of how ridiculous I showed up to the interview, again, I was in a Little Red Riding Hood outfit because it was Halloween and got surprised with an interview. It was actually rescheduled. It was supposed to be the following week. My boss at the time had a trip. He said, "Look, can you come in today?" So despite the outfit, I got the job. And I took it really seriously. I remember telling him in the interview, I'm like, my job as your administrative assistant is to do two things. One, to make you look good, and two, to make your life easier. And every day that I showed up to work, I really did everything that I possibly could in order to fulfill on both of those purposes. I would take notes, I would organize his office. I'd make sure that the printer had ink. But I think much more importantly, I started kind of walking around, right? Because I would kind of finish those tasks quickly. So I started walking around to the team, and the team was pretty good size. It was probably about 8 different individuals on the team. And I'd say, hey, do you have anything that you need some help with or that maybe you don't want to do today?
Right.
Of no surprise, people are like, oh, yeah, take this, have this. I got a stack of papers over here. And so very quickly, everyone was kind of giving me, the stuff on their list that they didn't want to do, or maybe that they didn't have time to do.
Yeah.
Within about 2 years, I was able to do their jobs. I was able to do several jobs on the team. So I remember walking into his office. I don't think it was like a formal meeting or anything like that. I felt that it was pretty serendipitous. I had thought about it a lot in advance, but I think I kind of sprung it on him as a surprise. And I walked into his office and I said, hey, look, I've been helping out the team. I now can do their job. And if you will give me a position on the team as a provider relations coordinator, I'll help you find another administrative assistant. And you don't have to give me a pay raise if we can make it happen quickly.
Wow.
Yes. So that's how I made the leap over.
So where did you get the boldness that enabled you to negotiate a salary in your 20s to do what you just said? Because I mean, at this point, I mean, you're no older than what, like 25, 26, and you're demanding things from multiple people in management. So where did that come from?
Yeah, I think it was a bit different at the time, right? So I knew that if if he would have said no, I could have gotten a job somewhere else. And I think that comfort level in knowing that I didn't actually need the job,
Yeah.
that if things came to a head, I could very quickly go get another job. I also think, just teenagers, right? I mean, I was at the very end of my teenage years at that point. They kind of have attitude. I certainly had a lot of it. Sometimes I wonder where a little bit of that went, but yeah, to this day, I don't know how I walked into the office so boldly and did it and got a yes. So huge testament to him for.
So he said yes, and
Yes.
you moved from the administrative assistant job to you think you said provider relations coordinator.
Yeah, yeah.
Which seems like a very different job from what you were doing. So what was this, because the administrative assistant job wasn't really healthcare, right? I mean, you were working for a healthcare company, but
Totally.
it wasn't really healthcare related.
Yeah.
What was this role, really now like officially with healthcare doing?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is I felt like I had been doing it already because every time I had downtime, I was, grabbing work from the team. And so, I understood how to put forward a credentialing packet, so we credential providers before they come onto the network. And I understood all the things that went into that. I understood how the medical economics people were looking at our membership across the different cities and towns, and coming up with rate proposals. And I understood how the rate schedule set by Medicare and CMS basically kind of played into the money that they would take home at the end of the day. So I felt like I had a really good foundational understanding, and so when I came into that role, I really just kind of picked it up and kept doing it, while also looking for ways to drive efficiency for myself and among the team. Once I got more acclimated in terms of the day-to-day responsibilities.
Right. So at this point, you'd already been doing the job. You took this job. Were you already thinking of what was next at this point when you took this job because you were already so comfortable with it?
No, not really.
Not really.
Um, at that point, I think I was just feeling really fulfilled with all the learning that I was doing. Every day, I was learning so much about, not only how to look at a rate negotiation, but how to look at the dynamics between demand and supply with the delivery system. I was also still in school at the time, so I started at community college, did that for a couple years, and then transferred over to Regis University for the money saving. Right, I'm like, oh, I can get my final degree at a big university, but not necessarily incur all the cost. So I had every minute of my day completely filled with something, and I think the last thing I was doing at that point was thinking about what was next. Obviously, that came eventually, but for a long
Yeah.
time, it was just kind of heads down.
So why finish college if you already had a career?
I believed in it. I definitely still believed in the power of a bachelor's degree. And naively, I also thought, gosh, the second I get a bachelor's degree, I'm going to see my salary skyrocket. That's not how it turned out.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. But that's, I think what we believe when we're young and dumb, right?
And I mean, even today, right? I mean, I tell people all the time, I tell people, go back, get your MBA, get your master's, and more education has never hurt anyone. But to your point, don't expect a raise just because you get a master's or an MBA. It will absolutely help you in your career, but it's not guaranteed more money.
Right.
I think that's a common misconception. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So you finish school, you have like an official healthcare career now. You're doing healthcare related activities, and then you said so. Great West got purchased in the 2008-2009 timeframe by Cigna.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like going through an acquisition like that, where you're at the company being acquired by a bigger company? I mean, was that a scary time for you, or kind of play that back for us?
Yeah, it was a very scary time for me because at that point I had about 7 to 8 years vested in Great West Healthcare. So I had definitely made a career out of it. And in that time, I'd also advanced to the role of a senior analyst, really negotiating at the national level for contracts. And so I'd had a really good ride during that time. And when Cigna came and bought us out, it was definitely a mix of excitement and total anxiety. In the role that I was in at the time, I had a national view of what was happening across the country because I worked with different sales teams and really people all over the United States. And it was almost like if you can imagine like a US map at night and you can see like all the lights across the various states. It was like the lights just started going out. It was like, oh, the light over in California just got a lot dimmer. And then the week after, it'd be like, oh, it's gone completely. The team's gone. All the people that I used to know and work with, all of a sudden they're gone. And there were probably about 6 or 7 different rounds of layoffs that I survived. And then finally, kind of the hammer came to head. And my boss at the time was really looking out for me. And she said, Taralyn, you've got to start looking for a different job because our team is going to be eliminated.
Right.
At that point, the writing was on the wall. And so that, in fact, that's how I made a huge career shift into the product organization. But it was very scary, and for a little period of time, unfortunately, a lot of work didn't get done.
Yeah.
It was hard for everybody. But luckily,
So, but I think the interesting thing is that the anxiety and all the change, you actually took advantage of it, right? And made a career change with it. So instead of actually, being a detriment to you, you made a career change, which I think is, I think actually happens quite often. I think, it's nice that your boss looked out for you, but you were proactive, and then you probably through all your networking found another role. But what was, when you moved to, and you'll have to explain to people what a product role means, right? Because I think a lot of people probably don't know what that means. Like, what is, so you were working with actual providers, which are healthcare providers before. What is a product role at a healthcare company? What were you doing in that role?
Yeah, I think that the best way I can describe it for folks is, like anything that you may have in your day-to-day life, your cell phone, right? This is a product. The type of TV you have is a product. So there's people in the healthcare industry that, just like people in technology, are working hard each and every day to kind of deliver you the services and solutions that you need to make your life easier. In healthcare, it's just a bit different because you can't touch it or pass it around. But it's things like chronic condition management programs, pharmacy programs, step therapy programs. There's people behind the scenes working to make sure that those programs are improving health and meeting the needs of customers, and that if they aren't, they're advancing the product in order to make it better for end users.
Yeah, I think, another thing that people might recognize is, like, if you have an HSA or an HRA or an FSA, those are all different healthcare products. So this was a big career change for you, going from the work you were doing now to the product role. At this point, did you have a mentor that was helping you through any of these changes, or, kind of through everything you were going through?
At the time I did not. In fact, what I had was a woman who was really willing to take a chance on me. So it's funny that you call out that in my, career journey up into that point, that had really been working with providers and the delivery system. The reason that's funny to me is because, I did that for about 8 years. And then when Cigna came and I had to have this career change, really it was kind of, do it or don't. And if you don't, you're going to have to find a different company to work for. And I liked what Cigna was about, and I wanted to see where it would take me. But when I had that interview for the product role, the woman at the time very quickly realized that I, in fact, didn't know a single thing about the products and services that the company offered. I wasn't even enrolled in a healthcare plan. I'm like, oh, I'm young, and I'm not risking my life out there every day. And again, I was a bit naive. I didn't have a lot of money. So I was trying to save, I think, like many Americans often do when they make trade-off decisions. I was trying to save that money that would have gone to healthcare premiums and use it for things like food or going out and having fun with my friends. And so, I walked into that interview with like zero baseline knowledge. And it was eye-opening for me because I'm like, wow, I've been here for so long and I've had success. And at the same time, walking into a different role, it was like this whole other, big new world. So she told me to actually come back. She said, you know what? Why don't you come back and we'll talk again in a week? She said, bring everything that you've done so far that you're really proud of. So I remember for that second meeting, I came in with like a binder full of, 80 different printouts. And I walked through the binder and I said, this is what I've done. This is why I'm proud of it. It was everything from PowerPoint decks to memos and announcements, to training curriculum, to kind of guidance on, or not guidance, but business recommendations on network adequacy issues. So kind of the whole gamut of things. And she basically hired me based on potential. And the major caveat was that I had to take a step back. So I had to go from a senior provider relations analyst all the way to the bottom of the product and marketing organization, which at the time was a marketing consultant. So I took a couple of steps back in order to do that and basically started all over again in 2009.
So that's really interesting. I think it's a really good, I think it's a really good story because a lot of people I think are hesitant to do that.
Yeah.
But I actually recently had a conversation with someone that wanted to move into HR, and I had the exact same conversation. You're not going to be able to pivot from the organization you're in today to HR without going, kind of backwards like you did. And I said, if you're okay with that, I think you'll have a better chance of finding a job. And they were okay with it. They were like, no, this is what I want to do. So they actually kind of were at peace with it. But I think it's a really good story because sometimes you have to. And again, I think a lot of people look at it as a negative because they might be losing, the title, right? But obviously, in your case, the opportunity that came with it was so much greater that you thought it was worth the trade-off.
Yeah. For me, the trade-off was I got to keep my tenure, and I got to stick with a company that I thought was, because I loved Great West Healthcare. And I thought Cigna had a lot of potential, and I was excited about what they had to offer. So that was the trade-off for me, which was easy to do at the time. It was kind of, again, that bold attitude of, yeah, I can take a step back, but I'm going to do double the time now. I'm going to work
Right.
hard, and I'm going to make it up, and I'm still going to get where I need to be.
So, so you were in the product role. When I was looking at your LinkedIn for really what, 9 years
Mhm.
in different types of roles, right? Like with added responsibility, different scope, bigger teams, things like that.
Mhm.
So what, as you went through those different roles, right? Because I mean, I was looking at I don't know, 4 or 5 roles. How did you keep finding all these new opportunities? Did you go out and find them, or was it you just kept getting asked to do other things? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say 90% of those, it was being tapped on the shoulder. So when I came into the product organization, again, not knowing anything, I came in right when mental health parity and healthcare reform were rolling out for the very first time. At the same time, we were also looking to build out a fully insured offering on one of our systems platforms. So, like in zero time flat, I had to come very quickly up to speed with everything that we were doing. And I did that for about 2 years in that very first job. And I remember after I did that, the same woman who gave me a chance, she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "I like what you just did for our medical benefits and offerings. Can you go do that for pharmacy?" And in the pharmacy role, I think I was in there 6 months, and quickly got promoted. So in 6 months, I had done a competitive intelligence review to basically make some high level recommendations for the company on how we could stay ahead of our competition. And that one project alone got me a promotion, and another tap on the shoulder for the next role, which was, really within health and wellness. So all of our disease management programs, chronic condition management, your biometrics, your health risk assessment, all those sorts of things. But it was kind of a continual cycle of, hey, we like what you did. Can you come do this over here? And
Right.
it's fine if you don't know anything about it, because we know that you'll figure it out. So I started to really develop a brand as someone who worked really hard, and could learn really quickly, and deliver results, really kind of regardless of the variables.
But I think if you look at your LinkedIn, you have some jobs for like a year, for 10 months, for 8 months. I think you can definitely see that trend because you got asked to do a lot of things in short periods of time and then got moved to something else.
Mhm.
So I feel like all of this has led you to the role you're in today, right? And the role you've been in today, LinkedIn says about 8 months, right? So not even a year yet. And that's how we met. Is your role? It says VP of Innovation, right? And I know you're in the marketing organization. So what are you doing in this role today, and how does it kind of take everything you've learned from the product perspective and the provider relations perspective and kind of bring it all together?
Yeah, great question again. So, at the highest level, I'm really in charge of creating an innovation strategy in order to drive growth for our US commercial book of business. And really doing that through kind of a two-pronged approach. Number one, it's about delivering a new enablement vehicle for creating that disruptive and differentiated value in market through new services and solutions that help Americans get, more affordable healthcare, that help employers see better health outcomes across their population, and quite frankly, and things that also make it easier for people to kind of navigate their health.
Right.
So that's, of course, very exciting and will be highly rewarding. The second thing that I'm really focused on is also figuring out new ways for us to bring the strength of Cigna innovation to market so that we can help employers, but really many outside of that, understand exactly what Cigna is doing to address really tough health challenges, both now and into the future, by bringing forward purposeful experiences that make it real and relevant for them.
So that this seems like a really complex, complicated, big job. Is it? And my assumption is from all our conversations, you're not expected to solve these problems on your own, right? You're working with people all across the company, within our industry, outside of our industry, to bring these, to try to come up with these big ideas. This isn't you by yourself, right? You're working across how many people? Countless, right?
Yeah, countless. There's so many people. And, with something like this, I'm really fortunate because it's the type of topic that everyone wants to be involved with, or at least wants to help guide, right? So I've got so many friends in so many places across the company just because of this role, who were like, you know what, maybe I, don't have time to invest directly in what you're doing. But here's some advice, or let me know if I can help you. And of course, there's many that are directly invested in making this a success. Nothing, especially to this size and scope, happens in a silo.
Right.
This is the type of area where you really do need a wide mix of perspectives around the table or around any sort of problem to help you kind of think through it, because we're looking to do some really new and exciting things here. And it only benefits me by working with others more. I'd be remiss to do this alone.
So you mentioned innovation, and I feel it's such a popular buzzword in name it, right? Name, if it's the corporate world, if it's the startup world, if it's the education space, right? Innovation is this really hot topic that everyone wants more innovation. They want to figure out how to make it happen. They want to figure out how to get it, how to like let it thrive, things like that. So when you think of innovation, and obviously I think, the reason that you're in this role is because you've done so many product roles across that, 8-9 years of time, and you've learned so much about so many different parts of the healthcare system. When you think of the word innovation, what do you like? What immediately comes to mind for you? Like when you found this role, why did it excite you so much?
Oh gosh, so many reasons. But I think it goes back to, kind of that childhood dream of having an opportunity to change the world or leave a meaningful impact. Healthcare is a broken industry in our country right now, and I think that there's a lot of Americans, millions of Americans out there, who are really frustrated with it, regardless of whether or not they have it. Those Americans that have health insurance find that it's expensive. They don't understand it, and it's complicated. And that's, even if you don't have a huge medical condition, I think these things are true. And for the folks that really are going through something, of course, these things are exasperated. So to be in a position to drive innovation for a global company, I mean, my focus is on the US, but the company is global. And for a company that has the type of assets that Cigna has, where we've gotten bigger and bigger over the years. I won't go through that, but we have really great capabilities across medical, pharmacy, and behavioral to really do some pretty powerful things that take the needs of the whole person into consideration, body and mind, right? So that really gets me excited. It's a huge burden to bear. But when I think about innovation and what the opportunity means here, for me, the word change comes to mind. Change and courage. We need change in a lot of different regards. And there's plenty of things out there where, doesn't have to be just me tackling it. I think this is things that so many employees at Cigna really live and breathe every single day. And then the courage to do it. I think one of the biggest differences sitting in an innovation role compared with prior roles is, whether it was product solutions or, network contracting, you kind of knew that you were on the right track when people are like nodding their heads and like encouraging you to keep going in the direction
Yeah.
you're headed. And with innovation, it's a bit different. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes you know that you're on the right track when it makes people feel uncomfortable, or when there's challenge to your ideas or to your vision. That's for me, that's a compass that maybe you're kind of rocking the boat a little bit. Um, so the understanding that I've gotten from my prior roles in terms of the larger ecosystem are certainly of high value. The network and relationships that I've made over this time within the company have also enabled this, me to be extra, um, I think, well positioned in a role like this. So it's really kind of the culmination of everything coming together all at once.
So I feel like the term innovation and your role are very ambiguous. For a lot of people, I think ambiguity scares them, especially when it comes to a job at work. So what do you tell people when they ask you about your role, and you mentioned how ambiguous it is? How do you deal with that ambiguity on a daily basis?
Oh, it's funny. I've always been a fan of ambiguity. For me, it's like gray matter that you can form and shape, or it's white space that you can play with. Like I've always liked ambiguity. This role has it in spades, and I
Yeah.
won't. There's been moments where the degree of ambiguity actually leads to a little bit of anxiety, especially when you're in a position to influence and really drive the strategy forward, because it's up to you to figure out what goes on the page, or it's up to you to kind of make a case for a particular direction and take something that is ambiguous and bring it into clarity so that others can come along with you. um, but it's a type of challenge I like. It's not for everyone. I'd say if you're the type of person that doesn't work well with ambiguity, and you like things to be really clear and direct and kind of A to B, this would definitely not be the role for you. But for those that do, it's very freeing and liberating, and inspirational on a day to day basis.
Yeah, no, I think I think probably the reason you're okay with it is because you've had so many other roles in your career that have, taught you this or taught you that, and kind of continue to, I think, just probably make it easier for you to realize what's going on, right? So I think it's probably one of those things that as you went through time, it just got easier and easier to deal with the ambiguity. Is probably my guess. So I want to go to the lightning round. I want to ask you a couple questions,
Okay.
some quick questions that we'll go through and see what you think. So first one, biggest accomplishment of your career to date.
Wow. It's actually a couple years back. We had just hired about 80 different we call them health improvement strategists. We hired 80 of them or so around the country. These were like folks straight out of college. They had degrees in nutrition and, and in health, and they really didn't have any experience in the healthcare industry at all. And we hadn't ever really hired people like this with the sole intent of having them work directly one-on-one with employers in order to improve the employee population of that particular employer. So these health improvement strategists would basically say, hey, you have a lot of people that are maybe struggling with obesity or maybe struggling with diabetes. Here's the programs that the company offers to help those folks. And, here I am, and I can offer you a personalized plan to kind of get everything back on track. These people were like bright-eyed, highly passionate, wanting to change the world. And the reason I give so much context is because, they came on board, and what we quickly found out was that they were almost overwhelmed with the amount of learning that it took to really understand all the things that a health insurance company does to support the health and well-being of populations. So they became frustrated, a little bit disheartened. They didn't feel like it was the job that they had necessarily signed up for. And we in their defense, we didn't have a lot of kind of the operational things ready behind the scenes in order to make it easy for them to get ramped up. So I was basically tapped on the shoulder with the number one mission being, get these folks back on board, get them excited, and give them the tools and the operational governance and procedures that they need in order to be effective. So I got to come up with a training curriculum. I got to fly all over the country and speak with them one-on-one, figure out how to translate healthcare jargon for folks coming straight out of college that didn't speak that language. And they're still around to this day, and they do incredible work, and they've gotten bigger and much more sophisticated. But that was kind of a pivotal moment where we were really at risk of kind of seeing that go away just as quickly as it had come up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've worked with some of those people, so I know who you're referencing, and they do make a big impact. So that's a great story. So on the flip side, biggest failure of your career to date?
Oh, I have a hard time with the word failure, because I think people can look at that with such a negative connotation. There's been a lot of little failures, I guess, or mistakes. I like the word mistake better because I think you can learn from a mistake. A failure feels so final, like, oh gosh, I failed that. I guess I better go try something else because that's not working for me. And that's just not the mindset that I have. But there's certainly been a lot of mistakes. I think one of my biggest mistakes, I actually made it twice before I learned my lesson, was about, and it's with all good intention, right? But there was 2 times in my career where I shared something to a large group that I thought the group needed to know, all based in fact and again with really good intent. But I didn't do the proper socializing before the meeting to tie off with folks because the information actually wasn't good. And I thought, business is business, just bring it to the table, tell folks what it is. And I really kind of forgot that human element in the moment. So in one instance, I made someone very upset and they cried. And in the other instance, I got screamed at in front of a bunch of folks. So that's probably the biggest mistake I've ever made. I don't make that mistake anymore, but it did take me 2 times to really have it hammered in.
Yeah. No, that sometimes I like how you mentioned though you learned from it and it was with good intent, because I think there's a difference between making a mistake with good intent and making a mistake and being malicious, right? So because then it's not really a mistake, it's more on purpose. All right, so last lightning round question. The person that's had the biggest impact on your career.
Oh, this is going to sound so cheesy. I have so many amazing mentors and guides that I wouldn't be where I'm at without any of them. And I'm fortunate to have a lot. But based on the way that you phrased the question, I gotta go with my dad.
I knew you were going to say that.
Turn me on. Yeah, everybody needs someone like that because, life is tough. Jobs are tough. And no matter how good you're doing or how good you feel, there's always going to be those moments where you question yourself or where maybe you didn't kill it that day. And you made a mistake. Or you weren't proud of the job that you did, even though you gave it your all.
We all have those days, right? We're all human.
Yeah. So you got to have someone in your corner,
Okay, so shout out to Dad. I like that.
Yeah,
so I want to say thank you for obviously making time to join us. We always close with a final question. I always ask every person, every guest, what is the one piece of advice you'd give my guests that's helped you be so successful in your career, right? So what's that one thing that's helped you reach your full potential that you would want to share with my audience?
That's a great question. Always ask. The worst you can be told is no, and that's the same as not asking. Always ask, whether it's for a job that doesn't exist, whether it's for more money. Always ask. A stretch assignment, an opportunity to have lunch with someone that you admire and respect. You will be surprised with the degree to which people say yes.
Yeah.
So always ask.
Very good advice. So thank you for making time. Like I said, for anyone that's listening to this on the podcast or watching it on the replay, you can check out the description, and we'll link to Taralyns LinkedIn so you can connect with her if you want to learn more about her career or get in touch with her. But thank you again for making time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Taralyn.
Yeah, bye everyone.